This is probably the smallest Pancake lens out there. And what is more is that it is for full frame mirrorless cameras. Check this out. But something this small looks more like a toy and more like decoration than an actual lens. So in this video, we'll find out whether this is any good. I'll show you some sample photos and you can determine by the end of today's video whether this is something you should consider getting as an actual photo lens or whether this is just a gimmick and if you should just use it for like some sort of vintagey decorative element or object. So this is a 28mm f2.8 lens, Pancake lens from a company called Brightin Star. So although they did send me this lens, all the thoughts in this video are my own and they do not get to see this video before you do. So this has a native mount for Leica end mount cameras, but it comes with a bunch of other adapters so that you can adapt this for different camera systems. Unfortunately, this lens does not have autofocus, so everything you do with this is going to be manual. But I think that adds to the experience of using a lens like this. I was able to borrow a Leica M3 just to show you how this looks on one of these rangefinder cameras. But all the photos I'll be showing you in this video are taken with the Sony a7 IV with an adapter for this lens. With the adapter, keep in mind that this is not going to be as ultra thin of a Pancake lens as if it was just this, you were just using this natively on an end mount camera. At about 350 USD, this lens has a very nice aesthetic and it looks very vintage. It is only 9.9 millimeters long and has a black lacquer coating that gives it that nice shiny finish that is very different from other lenses that I have used, for sure. It has a weight of 125 grams, which makes it still a little bit heavy for the size that it is. And that is because it is made of metal and glass, so a lot of quality materials, and therefore does not feel flimsy at all. So very, very well built, very solid. Overall, it feels like a very premium itty-bitty mini Pancake lens. It has an impressive 6 elements in 5 groups and 9 blades. The lens has 2 rings, but since there isn't space in the barrel, the rings are located pretty much at the front of the lens. There is an aperture ring and a focus ring with tons of markings for distance in meters and feet. The focusing ring is controlled by this tiny small lever that sticks up, while the aperture ring is just the top here, which makes it very difficult to control quickly. And I think, to be honest, is a quite impractical sort of control of the aperture ring. You pretty much have to push in while you rotate it and you have to look at it because there's no tactile feeling of what aperture value you're at. If you're shooting out in the winter or when it's cold and you're wearing gloves, you probably won't be able to adjust this aperture ring like just with the gloves. You'll have to take off your gloves and use your fingers and stuff like that. So very, very difficult to do, quite impractical, which might not be an issue if you look at this lens from the perspective of getting something that looks a little bit more vintage and just slow down the overall process of taking a photo, which in today's day and age with modern cameras, it's become almost like just spray and shoot and see what you get kind of thing with all of these frames that you can take per second on modern cameras. The fact that this is a little bit more difficult to control may lead to a better or more enjoyable sort of slow photo taking experience. Let me know if you agree. I would love to hear that in the comments below. I think with that, it's one of the reasons why film cameras are making a comeback, because you're no longer just shooting and spraying at 120 frames per second in your cameras and see what you can get. But now I feel like people want to take more time with their photos, with their composition, and just focus on the art of photography again. Let's find out whether the images that come out of this are worth using, and that will help you determine whether this is something that belongs in front of your camera or in your camera shelf as decoration. In terms of sharpness, this XSlim Pro is very sharp in the center and in the mid frame. Even wide open at f2.8, I found it quite sharp. Center sharpness is improved when you close down to f8, but sharpness at f2.8 is still very impressive nonetheless. Resolution on the mid frame is also very impressive, and it improves as you stop down. However, there is something that is not too pleasant, and that are the corners. The corners, no matter where you are in your aperture, they are just super smushed out. They are very blurry, they're not great open, and even closed down, they're still not great at all. But I do have to say though that overall, when you look at the image as a whole, I kind of like that the corners are like that because it gives these images a little bit more of texture, a little bit more of a different character, if you will. And overall, it makes it look a little bit, just a tad more vintagey. There is vignetting at f2.8. As you stop down, it improves, but overall, there's quite a bit of vignetting going on. There is also some barrel distortion, but that can be easily corrected in post-production. The bokeh overall is very nice, with some of that bokeh exhibiting outer rings. But overall, I think the out of focus elements are quite pleasant and beautiful without being distracting, except when you go to the corners and just a bunch of stuff starts to happen. Longitudinal chromatic aberrations, or Bokeh, are very minimal in my opinion, or quite controlled for a lens this size. There's a little bit of mild green fringing after the plane of focus, but in some of these images I couldn't find it, so pretty well controlled. Now, the minimum focusing distance is not as great as I thought for a lens this short. It's about 70 centimeters, which is average, I guess, but I was surprised I was not able to get a little closer, especially for a lens this small and short. The flares are quite interesting. This is what they look like. As you can see, they can be quite distracting. There's a lot of ghosting going on in some of the images, even with side flaring when the sun is right off to the side of the framing. The ghosting and the flaring can be quite distracting. And you can get a lot of unwanted artifacts. But if you step back and you sort of embrace these flares, quote unquote flaws, sometimes you're able to get some results that are a little bit more artistic with a little bit more texture, if you will. And it can give you a little bit of a nice different look, sort of like a retro look almost. Sunbirds are a little bit weird with this lens. They're not round, they're a little bit more of an oval shape of that sunlight source, and then you get some bursts like that. So not my favorite, but this is what they look like. By now, with all the images you've seen, you can probably tell for yourself whether this is a lens worth considering getting. If you want something that is super slim, then this might be something to consider. The focal length of 28mm is quite usable for a lot of street photography and just like a everyday walk around lens. It's a great option to bring along with you because it's very, very tiny. The imagery that you get is a little bit more on the retro side, which can be quite pleasant if that's something you're after. The lever on the focusing ring is quite nice and it helps a lot with that manual focusing. But some of the not so good parts are controlling that aperture ring. It is not user-friendly at all, it is not very practical, and it takes quite a bit of time for you to adjust that. If you're after corner-to-corner sharpness, you're not going to get this with this lens. If you want perfect flaring, you're not going to get this with this lens either. Those can be quite distracting at times, but when you use them tactfully, you're able to get some very interesting imagery. So if you don't mind these drawbacks and want a Pancake lens that is super small and slim and can give you a little bit of a different sort of imagery, then this one might be worth considering. If you're interested, I'll be leaving links in the description below for you to check out. And thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. And here are a couple more videos you could probably watch next, and I'll see you there.